Hello, listeners. Welcome back to our session this week. Today, I have with me Kimballe Robyzen, who is a naturopath, a herbalist, nutritionist, iridologist, and bioresonance practitioner. He specializes in prescribing and compounding personalized nutritional and herbal formulas using his bioresonance testing. Digestion has been a very big part of Kimballe's healing journey, starting in fact 15 years ago. It's led his clinical practice towards all aspects of dysbiosis, such as leaky gut, allergies, parasites, microbiome, and detoxification. Kimballe is passionate about helping his clients achieve their health goals by designing personalized health plans that offer sustainable benefits throughout their life. You can find Kimballe online, which I will leave the details below these broadcasts. He's also available and based on the Gold Coast, Brisbane in Australia. Welcome, Kimballe.
Thank you, Suzy. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, so we were having just a little pre-chat last week about all things cleansing, and it's what we wanted to really focus on today is what you call cleansing, and some might know as fasting, and even that in itself we have had a conversation about, because we have as humans get quite fearful of the word fasting, and in fact even sometimes cleansing, I think, don't they? So we try to make we're trying to make it more approachable for people, so they don't find it so scary, that it's not something that they have to steer away from, that it's not as bad as maybe what they're anticipating. So it's great to be able to have you on here, and because fasting's been quite a big part in my healing journey myself, just in the last year and more. And I was just speaking to someone before. In fact, when I was going through chemotherapy, the research came up around the huge benefits of fasting 36 hours before chemo and 24 hours afterwards, which was a practice I implemented. So I've continued to do that and do water fasts, et cetera, et cetera. But when we were talking the other day, it was just like, you know, people do, and I noticed it myself, people get nervous about fasting, or even, as we said, cleansing. So I guess I'm interested to hear from you, you know, like what are some of the ways that you find works with your clients? What are some of the approaches that you've used? And even if you even wanted to start with us a little bit about what your journey has been, because I think often there'll be people out there that can relate to your journey, you know, like we often can hear our story in another's story. So I do like the wholeness of storytelling as well, as much as you feel you'd like to share on that. And yeah, where do you see cleansing fitting in, and how that works for you with the clients that come across your path?
Yeah, great questions. It's a very broad topic and very personal one to me. And so I really enjoy sharing my experience and journey with it all. And I've really discovered the profound health benefits in all areas of my life, really.
Yeah.
So, and it did start with digestion being one of the core aspects of my, was a bit like a burnout kind of healing crisis of its own over 15 years ago. And, you know, it was a very, very sort of overwhelming and confusing process as I was exploring all the different approaches. And eventually, of course, it led me into doing further studies and eventually becoming a naturopath and starting lots of extra modalities, and on that went.
Oh wow! So you weren't a naturopath before this?
No. My first career was interior architecture, actually.
There you go. So now you're in interior architecture of a body instead of a building.
Yes. In fact, there's a lot of similarities. I approach each case, each client's life in the same kind of almost project management design, conceptual approach, where I like to implement those same strategies. I do enjoy collaborating with other practitioners in that studio sense, and I think I do apply a lot of those tools that I developed over those years. It's interesting.
See, nothing ever goes to waste, does it?
No, I've really, now that I'm really settled in this role, I think a lot of that experience has been very valuable, as well as being very involved in the corporate sector and what that life's like and the traps of that, which I fell into myself. And just having that familiarity makes it very easy for me to relate to my clients' health journeys and struggles and symptoms and things, because I've had so many of them myself. And over the course of that, and then of course having the healing journey or the focus on healing thereafter is part of the process that I'm sharing with him as we work together.
Can I just ask, I just had a thought of, what made you go down the mainstream path for your own healing journey 15 years ago? Were you already sort of a bit bent that way? Or like, I always find it interesting how we end up on the path that we end up on, trying to find our health.
We're always quite alternative as a family.
Yeah.
We used to go to a biochemist and a neurodologist actually when we were kids. Okay. When they discovered I had a bit of an asthma issue as a young child, I got and did different things. So it was kind of always an interest to do things, to explore that more natural approach to health. Yeah. So I think that was always part of our kind of family culture in a sense. Yeah. But there was, during the course of time, there's been a lot of understandings about, the things we didn't know about back then was wheat and leaky gut and what are these things and histamine. And so like there's a whole range of aspects that, that takes a lot more focus and study and I think clinical application to really understand that in the detail that we need to these days.
We've got our information that we have now compared to 15 years ago about the gut is like, it's huge, isn't it? It's massive. Like 15 years ago, we really didn't know anything. I don't even know if the term leaky gut, we only had IBS. I don't even know if leaky gut was or permeable gut was even invented back then. But yeah.
No, well, it's probably quite a recent development, to really recognize this whole permeability factor of the gut.
Yeah. So take me then to so in some of the work and what we're doing, and one of the messages you wanted to really talk to people and get out there was about that cleansing in fact can be achievable. Like some of the things that how you see cleansing maybe is a good place for us to start maybe. Like how do you define cleansing?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's I term it cleansing. I think it's a bit more of a user-friendly approach because it is in different grades. So detoxification sounds a bit heavy going and might be quite a confronting process, but and it may involve fasting and it may not. So there's many different ways to enter into cleansing. And I'm very passionate about it because it's what it does is it creates like a mini metabolic challenge for us. This whole blood sugar balance, insulin resistance aspect. I think that's what often makes anyone cautious around fasting or cleansing or calorie restriction or anything like that, because they're in the situation where they are quite carbohydrate dependent in their metabolic state. And so when they miss a meal or they don't have any food intake for a while, then their blood sugar will drop, and then things will feel a bit uncomfortable, and the mood swings and energy will drop, and cravings and things will creep in. And so I think that creates a natural hesitancy around, trying to do something more, lengthier versions of that. So I really do understand how that most people will have that caution. And also, there's many different approaches, rather than going in for a boots and all hardcore deep cleanse, that's something that you would reserve until you've done smaller, lighter versions. So it's really like a light entry into something like this.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
And doing things, and that's why I like to encourage to do it on a regular basis. So even weekly. My current schedule now is 2 days a week. I'll do cleansing, which for me, over the last few years is basically fasting with some supplements and herbs and things, some anti-inflammatory things, maybe some binders, but it's basically without meals. And that keeps me in that mindset. And so whoever's wanting to do something around boosting their immunity or supporting their digestion or just simply cleansing toxins from their body, then if they're doing some effort in some small degree on a more regular basis, then it's something that becomes more front of mind, something that you make efforts towards. And it might be just soup, it might be bone broth, it might be green juices. There's many different ways to do it that still includes some food or drinks of some kind. But at least you're chipping away a little bit each time. It's not something that you put in the too hard basket or put aside for spring or something like that, because we need to do more of it these days.
Sorry.
Yeah.
1st of January.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's becoming more and more relevant, not only because we have more toxins to liberate from the body, but also it's a great boost to the immune system, because 70% of our immune system is built around that, right?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you. Like, if you wanted just to talk a little bit about, and I want to come back to intermittent fasting as well, because I think that's a word that a lot of people talk about now, and are starting to feel more comfortable with that, in fact. So even for your 5-2, even if people can practice doing an intermittent, a 16-8 or a 18-4 or whatever, or even less, then at least we're starting, because all we really are wanting to do is mimic what our body has done. Our body when it was invented, it didn't have a supermarket to go to and get all the food from. So we're really just mimicking that opportunity. And maybe if you wanted to talk a little bit more about the immune, and also about, like when we're digesting food, we can't cleanse. Our body can only do one thing or the other. It can't digest like when we eat food, and it can't cleanse at the same time. So I don't know if you want to speak on that for us just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally in agreement there, Suzy, because in the past we had food scarcity, we had winters, we had many natural involuntary opportunities for the body to do that cleansing process. And I think it's always been part of the way the body looks after itself. So now we do need to, with the fact that food is so available, that we do need to schedule in that food scarcity or that avoidance of food, because you're quite right. They are in sort of natural opposition to each other within the body. When we eat something, the body can't neglect it, can't avoid it. So it must metabolize it and absorb it, and that's all anabolic for growth, for repair, for healing, and all of that. So for detoxification, it's almost like turning the wheels around. So rather than taking in and metabolizing and distributing substances, it's now needing to turn that around and actually draw and funnel these things through the elimination channels to exit the body. So they are quite in polar opposite. That's why fasting is so powerful. Yeah. Because even in the intermittent version, which, as you explain, there's many patterns. You might just miss breakfast, but you can close the eating window. And that's basically how I eat every day anyway. So I'm doing intermittent fasting as a general lifestyle I really can't
Yeah.
imagine how I used to fit 3 meals in a day, actually.
What about when we used to do 6?
Yeah. And so, when we, turn off that switch through the fasting, it activates all of these autophagy, which is the cellular cleansing. It gets the lymphatics going, and it is good to do. You can promote it further with infrared saunas and light exercise to keep the thyroid going, and a range of things that can deepen the elimination of the toxins. But the fasting is like the switch. So it gives the body permission then to start doing the elimination. And it's very difficult for it to do that in the presence of ongoing snacking and grazing in that way. And so, sleep ends up being the main opportunity the body has to do that. But, for that short amount of time, with our ongoing toxins and lifestyle and stress and leaky gut and all of these other complications these days, preservatives in food and so many unnatural elements that our body's trying to adapt to and integrate, and rising immune challenges, this becomes one of the most profound things we can do for health.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we've got ourselves into a state where we're fighting our own selves, we're fighting our own body, because we don't match in with the rhythms that our body's gifted with. And even the circadian rhythms of the earth as well, like the old sayings, if you don't eat when the sun goes down, you only eat when the sun's up. And those types of things that I think are worthwhile remembering, because often people will, like you say, that we have an opportunity to cleanse when we sleep, but some people don't maybe go to sleep until 12 o'clock and then they're awake again at 5.
That's right.
And then they might be eating and having their last midnight snack at 11 o'clock if you're that type of person as well, because they're all habits that we get into, right? They're all habits. We can't sleep, so then we get up and we walk around, we get a snack, we do this, we do that. And I think that, those habits and getting and being mindful that we have to connect back into our circadian rhythm. We have to connect back into our body. And I just wanted to share, when I teach colonics, I'm teaching about the digestive system, obviously. But, I like people to think about in your small intestines, you've got little cleaners, they've got little brooms. And after you don't have anything in your stomach for 4 hours, those little cleaners come in and they, your little villi. So you got your little villi at the up end. So they come in and they clean out in between. They clean all the mess in there. But there has to be no food for 4 hours. As soon as they get an inkling that you've got food, so that would mean a hormonal response, right? You've got food coming in because it's all of the digestive hormones that determine what's going on in there. As soon as they get that sense, then those little cleaners are out of there. So we haven't had an opportunity to clean in there. You know what I mean? So if we're constantly eating, not only are our cleaners not getting done, because we can't leave food sitting in our stomach, it rots and then we will die. So that is the opposition that you're talking about. It really is that simple, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that's why I find sort of preparing the metabolism to be more qualified, to be able to be more flexible and be able to produce energy from the different macros, be it carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Because if we are more carbohydrate dependent in our metabolism, it's very difficult for us to avoid eating constantly, because sugar's metabolized so quickly. And so this sort of grazing, snacking lifestyle tends to be, the way that a carb-centric diet needs to follow, because of this quick metabolic rate of carbohydrates. And so that's been kind of the key approach or tips that I've been sharing with my clients, is that the new hero really is the healthy fats. Because if you're going to reduce the carbohydrates, you need to replace it with something else. And so the fats become become the new secret weapon of sorts, because then that will metabolize. It's like polar opposite. It'll metabolize much slower. It'll balance the blood sugar. And so then you're not so exposed to or vulnerable to blood sugar dropping and cravings and things like that. It becomes a lot easier. You enter that ketogenic state a lot more readily. And so if you miss a meal or you have a day of fasting, you just burn the fat off your body and you're turning over those toxins stored in the adipose tissue. And so it becomes a really kind of simple, like seamless transition for your body, because you've trained it or given it more practice to metabolize other macros into energy and not be so dependent on the carbohydrates.
I read someone talking about fasting once, and they talk about our sugars are our cheap foods. It's our cheap fuel that's stored in our liver. And then we have our expensive fuel, our fat fuel, and it's stored in our freezer. And the problem is that we never get to our freezer because we're constantly got our cheap sauce going on there, right?
Yes, that's right. The glycogen in the liver will last you 24 hours, no problem.
Yeah. And it's hard for us to get our head around that, isn't it? Because something you said before, I just want to bring up now, is around, you sometimes will say to a person, to go to do a fast or to do a cleanse, and you can see them retract. It's like, oh my God, really? You're going to cut off my head? Like, I can't do that. It's like,
I do have to enter that topic very delicately, for sure.
Yeah. And it's like, it's interesting though, isn't it? How so when I think about that, so we've actually equated being hungry as being uncomfortable. Whereas when I feel hungry, I go, oh, that's such a good feeling to feel empty. My body can now do what it needs to do. Like, I've actually taught myself, if I don't feel hungry every day, I worry. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, why aren't I feeling that hunger anymore? Like, what have I eaten too much? But I think it comes back to we feel uncomfortable. We equate hungry with being uncomfortable, and I don't. Yep. I find that interesting. I don't know. Maybe that's because that's our makeup. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's a bit of an interest out there. I hear this quite regularly, this idea of intuitive eating, so listen to your body.
Well, that means all the time.
And that's quite a complicated approach, because are you responding to your blood sugar dropping? But as you say, hunger itself is actually a very healthy sign that your body is actually cleaning house, and it should be welcomed and enjoyed. And I think that's what's really given me a lot of confidence and appreciation for the hunger. When once a week I'm having this gap from food, and I actually go deeper into that. I don't really necessarily experience hunger in that sense like I used to, because of my metabolic flexibility these days. But it's the more hollowness, or a little bit of a grumble here and there, or it's just nice to feel that you get into that fully empty state, knowing that your body is actually doing a lot of really great processes for you on your behalf, in the absence of food, and just to have that contrast between the fullness of food, what that's like, and what it's like to function without it. I think it's a really, really interesting experience to dip in and out, and to challenge yourself around things that you may be more attached to, and so that gives you a way of really gauging your metabolic state, but as well as your relationship with those foods and drink choices.
Totally. And it's like, I think it can lead us into a lot of other areas, because it really comes back to, at the end of the day, it comes back to self-discipline. And it comes back to being aware about what our compulsion is, what our gluttony is. We are such an abundant earth, mostly an abundant earth, as in there's not many people that don't have a pantry of food in Australia that of some sort. And I'm not negating the poverty in the world. Please don't hear that the wrong way, people. But in general, in the Western world, there's a lot, people have a lot of food, and we see a lot of the wastage of food, you know. So there is that whole sense there that we've got more, and we see the panic that people go into when they can't get to a supermarket for a day. Like, forget about any strikes or anything, but just if it's closed Christmas Day or something, like, people have to go and buy truckloads of food. So it's interesting how and sometimes I do wonder, like, I wonder if this is like just our wiring from our primal days of having to stock up in the caves, because we're still thinking like that in our primitive brain, but our conscious brain knows that it's all right, we've got a supermarket down the road tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. And unless you're in that sort of high healthy fat paleo keto style of eating, you would naturally panic, because you really don't survive very well by missing a meal or a day without food. So
Yeah.
that's really the key secret weapon. I really do find that. And so initially it's about just overlaying these healthy fats on top of the existing diet, and it will naturally displace those other calories and choices and cravings and energy and things like that. Everything tends to level out. So it's like a self-regulating approach. You can feel more calm. Fats are like a nerve iron. So everything balances out unless everything is less overwhelming, because the blood sugar is not doing such a steep roller coaster in that sense. And so you can relax around food shortages. In fact, in my sort of personal life, socially and otherwise, I'm often looking for an opportunity to miss a meal, because it's like, you know, obviously the food choices won't be the same wherever I'm going, and I'm not attached to whatever food's going around. I'm quite happy to just be very selective around what I'm eating, because it serves my health better, rather than sort of committing to a whole plate of food I know I'm not going to tolerate very well and wear that for days after. So it's like it becomes a new mindset, this cleansing. If it's part of your health strategy, you can utilize it in many different sort of flexible ways.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because it is a mindset. And then my mind goes back to when you're talking about when we're hungry and we've stopped our carbs. In my world, I've got health. That also talks to me about candida, you know, like our candida. So it's not us being hungry, it's a candida or the parasites. They're hungry because they don't have their food source anymore. Like, the candida loves the sugars of any shape or type or description. So once we start to withdraw those, our body is going, and people might get fuzzy headed, they might be out there, their sight might be a bit blurry, their energy's low, they're going to get anxious. Like the symptoms that come out of candida and sugar withdrawal, like they are real. That's very true. So understanding how to manage that, and to know that, do you know what, this is not me. I can actually sit with this. So if someone's going through that, what would your recommendation be to the person to deal with that moment? Because it really is just a moment.
Yeah, I mean, the two main aspects that are going to spike someone's blood sugar and throw them around in that way is, yes, the sugars and alcohol and chocolate and all those types of things that are going to enter the blood very quickly, but also stress, which is often overlooked, because via the adrenals, it will spike your blood glucose. So stress combined with carbs really amplifies how steep and how deep those peaks and troughs are in the blood sugar. And that's really what makes things more confronting, makes things more extreme, makes us really almost not our original selves. We become this sort of aggravated, going through different withdrawals and things like that. We can't be our true self in that sort of metabolic dynamic. So doing things to support the nervous system, and so there's many different ways we can do that, and then just balancing out the diet, or having these sort of healthy snacks like fat bombs and things, as opposed to having fruit or candy or other ways of getting through that segment of the day. So I like to focus. I really do lead in with these fats. I have a range of very super low carb recipes, keto pancakes, chocolate mousse, fat bombs, these sorts of things that give someone an entry point into having some alternative that will level out their blood sugar rather than stimulate it again, as well at the same time doing something for their nervous system.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I've always been taught in fasting, I don't even know where I was taught this, but it's just been forever in my mind that it's not the fast so much as it's in fact the leading up and the finishing of the fast. So you're choosing to go in to do a juice fast even, or a water fast for an extended time, 24 hours and more, then it's about the lead up. So don't go and finish, you're finishing having your coffee, your chocolate, your drink, your alcoholic drink and your pasta, and now you decide that you're going to go on a 24-hour fast, right? So
Correct.
it's like, wait there, we've got to lead the body in, is what you're saying, because otherwise you're going to become another type of human being in that 24 hours, and it is going to be painful. And then I'll get you to talk on that. But just before I do, just then the other side of that is when we're coming off the fast, because when we're coming off the fast is when we're actually, so our cells have been regenerating. Our cells in our colon actually regenerate every 5 days. So we've had, like, depending on how long we've been doing it, it's been having a few days of regeneration, right? So then when we come back in and we're starting to eat again, what we eat is so very important, because that's going to determine your microbial diversity right there. So I saw a lot in the fitness industry, and this was years ago, so this may not be the case, but when the athletes get ready and they do their broccoli and chicken for 6 months, and then they do their performance or their show or whatever that they're doing, participating in, they come off, and then to celebrate, they have their cheat day, so they might eat pizza, Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's and whatever. And it's like, wait, stop. What are you doing? Don't do that to your body. Because I always felt like that's sort of like abuse anyway. Like, your poor body, you've worked it so hard, and now you're going to dump all that really hard to digest. But coming off the fast, I think, like, they're the bookends really of the fast. The fast, yes, we do that, but what you're talking about leading up and getting that insulin in the right, so you got that right frame of mind, I think is really important. Just as important as at the other end, like, and I guess how you're coming off and how you're starting and how long you're doing it for is totally dependent on what you're trying to achieve, right? Like, some people will be going in for a specific health concern. Some people will just want to do it for their every week wellness and decide to do a 5-2 eating regime. That might be just what they do. But coming off on that other side to make sure that, because it's a microbial diversity, and what I talk about in my world, it's like, we can have all your probiotics that you might like, and we can get a lot of those now, but if they don't have somewhere to live, so as in the wall of the colon, then it's pointless. So what we're eating after we come off that fast is really important. Is there anything that you would like to add to that, or that you see with your clients with that?
Yes, absolutely. That's it's like real estate down there. So and it's like whatever food you send down there is like putting bait into the jungle. Who's going to come out and feed on it, so to speak? What microbes are you going to encourage? So it just reinforces my interest in keeping carbohydrates. I mean, all plants, salads and things, they're all predominantly carbohydrate with fiber, so we get plenty in there. We don't need to add in the other grains and fruits and starchy veg of any particular quantity for health. So when we're having just a variety of plants and proteins and fats in that sort of balanced composition, then you are going to encourage or foster a diversity in the microbiome. If it is a high carbohydrate version, then you are going to encourage the candida, who are the ones that will ferment those sugars because they are a yeast strain. And so they will monopolize the microbiome through their ability to consume those sugars. And it's that excess fermentation that I see in clinic is the main predominant disruption to many. Well, you'd be surprised how many health conditions are affected by that. And so in my impression is that this is actually the core, driver behind leaky gut, this inflamed gut, this permeable gut, creating a pro-inflammatory immune cascade as a consequence, is all driven by this excessive fermentation, this candida activity. So it starts to infiltrate and congest the lymphatics. It starts affecting allergies. The bowel becomes less tolerant of many things, skin eruptions, foggy brain, all of those things, fatigue. There's a lot of disruption or a lot of fires that need to be put out by the immune system. So all immune challenges then become compromised because of this. It's like a fire that the immune system's trying to put out. That's coming through the gut every meal. So, the immune system is putting out a lot of these fires every time we put more carbohydrates in there. There's more fermentation, more inflammation. And so depending on your genetics and different sensitivities, depending on what type of effect that's going to have. So the cleaner we keep that, and this is, I've learned this a lot from you too, Suzy. I really found doing, I don't know how many colonics I've had at Bottoms Up now, but it must be over 50 by now. And I've done week-long ones every month. Last year, I've, doing the fasting every week. I was doing a colonics once a week. Now I'm on a fortnightly schedule with that, but I'll do an enema on the off week. So I've really have discovered that this bioterrain of the gut, the old plaques and biofilms and things that get lodged there over the course of time really create a toxic environment for a lot of these things to prosper. So the more that we are able to slowly eliminate this burden from the gut, the more everything opens up. The microbiome has more space to thrive, and everything functions better. The toxins have a more direct way of elimination. The liver is not so congested by having to recycle toxins back through the enterohepatic circulation, and there's a lot of ongoing value that comes from that as well.
I think, and people, I can hear people gasping and going, "Oh my God, that many colonics, where does it all sit?" And I really like just to point out, it's always my little teacher hat comes on here, my education, because when we're doing colonics, we're making a flow in your body. It's about giving your body a sense of flow, and that's through all of your cells. So yes, while we're targeting the large colon with a closed colonic, it's like when we clean the river out down the bottom of the stream, it allows the top to flow. So when we clean out this down the bottom, it is allowing, it's also reducing the inflammation, but it's allowing a flow. But that flow is just not in our digestive system. That's also with all of our cells. So the way that we actually do our technique is that we actually ensure that we've got the water sitting in your colon through the duration of the session, really. But the idea of that is flooding your cells. So that allows those toxins to lift off. And it's promoting that autophagy that you were talking about, like we've got to get rid of those dead cells. And it's like, how many cells do we have? I don't know, around 1 trillion. How many bacteria do we have? Oh, around 1 trillion. So we have to start to understand that our body is just this ongoing compost that it's regenerating itself all of the time.
There's a lot of turnover.
A lot of turnover. So I can go and have colonics after 15, 20 years and the tubes can still be full. And it's like, people just go, surely not. And it's like, well, yes, because the thing that, and you brought this up before, and we don't talk about this enough when it comes to autoimmune and the diseases of the colon, is the stress factor. Because if we've got a high stress, then we know that our colon is tight and stressed. We just know that. So we know now our flow in our body has now become reduced. So now we've got a problem. Now we've got imbalances and dysbiosis starting to take, because pathogenic bacteria live in a different environment than good bacteria and yeast.
Yes.
Bacteria and yeast. So when we're stressed and when we're anxious and when we don't have time and when we're busy and when we're eating things and when we're not living in our right way, that all becomes congested, right? That all makes up for that soupy mix as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah, it's particularly after a certain age, I think there's been a lot of accumulation. We've all been wounded digestively in many different ways, just through a bit of a crash test dummy of a generation when it comes to commercial foods and additives and things like that. So, where it's now coming to more light how the digestion has had to try and adapt to that. We're discovering new forms or levels of injury to the digestion. We've now know about SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where there can be a retrograde transmission of the pathogenic microbes entering into the small intestine through the ileocecal valve. The whole histamine fermentation generation of these microbes, and an actually effect of motility. So that fermentation produces off-gassing, and the two main gases, so hydrogen, if that's a predominant one, will create more diarrhea. And if it's more methane with using methanogens, it will create more constipation. So the actual gases produced by the fermentation have a direct impact on motility itself. So
and
there's all these sorts of dynamics.
There is, and it can get so complex, can't it? And that's why I just wanted to say two things there, but that's why fasting is such a nice technique, because it allows our body the space. We don't have to try and do magic or anything. We can just give it some space. And if we believe in the body's own healing ability, given the right environment, and often it can just be fasting, depending on what you're coming with, and you're going to take different supplements and whatever to support that process. But, it is just about that. The thing that I just wanted to come back to, was the fermentation. When you're talking about fermentation in the gut, I prefer to use the word putrefaction. I get concerned when we actually say fermentation in the negative, because fermentation, in fact, is good. If we're fermenting well, then we're actually processing well. Is that
yes. But yeah, I do have a different slant on that, just through my personal experience, and of course the clients that I'm working with in a similar way, because it's true. The fermentation is a natural activity of the microbiome in the gut, and for that we're thankful, and it does a lot of positive things. But I think what you're describing there is fermentation in balance, not to demonize fermentation as a bad thing. Candida is actually a commensal native strain of our microbiome, and it's there for a very important reason, particularly in times of food scarcity, where it doesn't need much morsel of a food to keep the activity alive. And I think that's the main role of Candida, is to be able to do that, because of its ability to ferment or to consume these sugars. It's able to do that very readily. It's just that we're in this a completely different paradigm now of overconsumption and over and frequent grazing way of eating, that the candida then quickly becomes overwhelmed, and fermentation then becomes a bit of a problem because of the excess of it. So it's really only the excess that's the problem, not the fermentation. And so that's been my finding. I see this in the tongue signs, in the iris signs, in my own health, in my clients' symptom journey, that there's pretty much a pandemic out there of excess fermentation, just simply because we have access to so many carbohydrates. And so that tends to have a bit of a burden in that sense that just needs to be balanced out and regulated. And so we just have to be very mindful. So, depending on your sensitivity to them, depending if you have allergies, a range of these sorts of issues will determine how much you can tolerate and how much is going to create a balanced effect rather than an overwhelming effect.
Yeah. It's such a rabbit hole, isn't it? We could go down many, many, many rabbit holes. I just don't like us to, I think words are so important, because people pick up words and then all of a sudden it's either a negative or a positive word. And I think in the role of digestion, it's not. It's about balance. And we have to actually, as you said, excess or not enough. It's like, it's all about a balance. And for me, my teacher is Mother Earth, actually, and looking at her and how she breaks things down in her environment and what she actually needs, and even to go to a compost bin. And but again, there's so many variables to that. And we've got more variables because we are a human and we have emotions, and they come in there as well. So just to finish up, I'm just wondering, what is, I'm going to put you on the spot. Have you got three tips for someone that's wanting to go on the cleansing journey, just to finish up with, that you would like people to have as a takeaway?
Okay. Yes. So I would start with, before you make any changes, I would start with increasing the amount of healthy fats in your diet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's most of the fats, but it excludes, the trans fats. So that's vegetable oils, margarine, any of these fats that are commercialized for their shelf life. So the healthy ones are, coconut oil, olive oil, whole range avocado oil, all of these types of things.
All the seed oils, yeah.
Yes, fish oils and evening primrose and so many. And then of course you'll have the natural fats within the proteins, within the fish, the chicken, the meats, as you prefer. And I'm very generous with those things in the cooking pan or roasting pan, maybe an extra salad dressing, so that way it will naturally start to train your metabolism to be more fat adapted. So it will be more balanced. It won't be fluctuating so much, and you will feel more able, have greater capacity to start closing your eating window. So if you can aim towards 2 meals a day to begin with as a general way of eating, then you're already moving in the right direction. You've already demonstrated to yourself that you can function quite well without breakfast, for example. And then, then I would, aim to whatever frequency you're comfortable with, whether it's once a month, once a fortnight, once a week, have some kind of cleansing effort, whether it's, the bone broth or the soup or the green juice without the fruit, like the smoothie types that, lemon and greens and avocado and celery, that sort of thing.
No mangoes.
No, they're very fermentable, the FODMAP foods. Yes, that's right. So that way you are creating sort of a mini challenge to yourself as to how well you cope in this lighter, low caloric cleansing day. And then it's like a muscle. I think it's It's just something that needs to be strengthened and practice, so you get more confident with it. So that's why I think the regular effort is the best way forward, because you're only dipping your toe in. You're just doing these little ones, not these big extensive detoxes, and have to go away for a retreat, and you're going to be sleeping all day and getting massages, although that'd be a nice way to do it. But, you know, we all, yes, but we all have busy lives. So I think rather than waiting for those opportunities, it's much more productive for us to do these little mini versions in the light of our busy life, and just choose the day of the week that's, you know, a bit lighter or a bit more convenient. I mean, I find that I'm very switched on. My concentration is great. I actually have better energy, and I don't have any hunger on those days. So I actually look forward to it. I have these really productive work days, Tuesday and Wednesday every week. So, you know, but just to ease into it lightly. Make sure that you have electrolytes in your drinking water, the unsweetened type. That's going to help avoid headaches and keep the cellular activity going. And then, you know, seek some professional advice around what sort of support you may need, whether it's for the liver, you know, kidney, lymphatics, and any kind of, you know, metabolic or cellular needs, any kind of historic issues that might complain a bit. If you challenge yourself, that might need a bit more direct support or things like that. But yeah, I think, you know, this is the way to enter into it gradually.
And it's just, it is very much a step-by-step thing, isn't it? And it is very much about finding some support, because I think it's always good to have a support around you when you're doing this stuff. Kimballe, it's been awesome chatting with you today. Thank you for taking your time out of your schedule to hang out with us today and just to dive in these different places. And as we said, it's a rabbit hole, and there's so many different varied ideas. And I guess my hope is that in people finding their own journey to health is that they can grasp little bits of information that have worked for other people and professionals, so that we can actually reclaim our health and, you know, sink back into our body and get the joy out of it, of what it's supposed to be. So thanks for joining us today. And
it's been my great pleasure, Suzy.
And if anyone has any questions, information, this is going to be on all of our socials. It will be on Kimballe's social as well. And I will put his contact details underneath. And until next time, listeners, I can't wait to chat with you again in a couple of weeks' time. See ya.